why don't we already start with the speakers? So why don't we go straight on to Junayd Islam from Cambridge Schools Ecocouncil, former co-chair, key organizer of the student climate strikes and city council live-streamed Ecocouncil meetings.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. And I'm so glad we're having this discussion on rivers and the climate crisis, because these two issues are so importantly linked. As we'll see, both have been caused by years of irresponsible, short-sighted mistreatment of our environment, and both need huge, drastic action to alleviate the dangers they pose. It is absolutely vital that we educate ourselves about the climate and local water crisis, especially when those who should be educating us fail to do so. Let me start by stating that the rivers we have in Cambridgeshire are some of the most beautiful and unique water systems in the world. They are called chalk streams and are fed by large hills of chalk. When rain comes down, these chalk hills filter the water. Our local rivers are fed by nature's most effective water cleaners on the planet. They have clear, pristine water flowing through them. There are only 200 of these chalk streams on the planet, and around 170 of them exist in England. Unfortunately, these precious chalk streams have been suffering in recent years, and people have noticed for quite a long time. In 2003, the government enacted the EU's directive called Water Framework Directive. They pledged that by 2015, all UK rivers and water bodies would reach good environmental status. So in the same year I was born, the UK government pledged that all rivers would reach good status by 2015. However, in 2014, 1 year before the deadline, the government published a report that only 17% of all rivers in the UK had reached good status. That means for every 10 rivers in England, at least 8 had bad status. The next year, in 2015, the year of the deadline, we find even less rivers have good status. What do you do when you fail to meet a deadline? Apparently, you just extend the deadline. The government then said all rivers would be good by 2021, and then they extended that deadline to 2027. But then came 2020, and a devastating report was released stating that no rivers in 2019 reached good environmental status. Not a single river in England has good health. How did we get to a point where every river in England is polluted and has bad health? The answer is quite simple: over-abstraction and sewage discharge. Here's the thing: Southeast England is one of the most densely populated areas in the country. Cambridge is one of the most famous hubs of innovative science and technology, and we continue to draw big businesses and people looking for good jobs. This city has been expanding and growing, which means water demand has been going up, and there is a lot of sewage. Water takes a lot of money and energy to transport, so it is a blessing that we have this pristine source of drinkable water right next door for us to consume. The problem is, water companies have been taking out water from the chalk to such an extent that it has been harming our rivers. And if you don't believe me, take a look at what some of our chalk streams look like today. These are all chalk streams. They are supposed to have pristine water flowing through them. And this is what our chalk streams should look like. I got these pictures from a public talk by Fergal Sharkey last December. He narrated how he has personally stood in the banks of these beautiful streams and was able to look 8 feet into the water to see the grains of sand at the bed of the stream. This is a failure. It's not hard to see what the solution is. If you go to the Santec report from November 2020, page 24, it explicitly states that there is no environmental capacity for additional development in the new local plan to be supplied with water by increased abstraction from the chalk aquifer. Even the current level of abstraction is widely believed to be unsustainable, potentially causing environmental damage as described above, and pressure is building to reduce abstraction rates significantly, safeguarding natural river flow. I understand that the economy needs to develop. I understand that people want more secure jobs, but economic growth and development has to be done carefully and with a holistic approach, because the fact of the matter is our rivers are in serious trouble. I have walked through Cambridge's countryside and I have seen ditches that look like this. I assumed that they were nothing more than ditches. To realize that those ditches might have actually been short streams is heartbreaking. I have never seen a river. I have never seen a river of the same quality as this one. Our generation has been robbed of these rivers by irresponsible, short-sighted mistreatment of the local environment, and we need to take drastic action to get them back.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, why don't we move straight on? Sadly, our other Gold Award laureate, Voices of Future Generations, Child Initiative, Child Author, couldn't make it today. She is on another time zone, so it is understandable. But yes, so we're going to move straight on to our adult speakers, and we're going to start with Ian Hawes, who is the leader of the Cambridge Friends of the Earth. Ian?
Hello, yes, Ian Rawls here. I'll just try and share my screen on my very ancient laptop, which I suspect is somewhat older than most of the people watching. But let's have a go and see what happens, shall we? Here we go. And then share screen. Oh dear, is that working? Dum, dum, dum. I'm trying to share a PowerPoint presentation. I'm taking it, people can't actually. Okay. Ah, there we are. Share. Is that working for everybody?
We can see a bit of your screen, yeah.
Ah, there we go. Right, and I shall start the slideshow. Sorry, spot the old fogey here who can't quite handle a computer. Here we go. Right, is that good? Fantastic. Okay, there's perhaps be a little bit of repetition here with what Junayd said, but it does bear repeating because we are in a pretty parlous state with the water in Cambridge. So basically, where does Cambridge's water come from? As Junayd said, it basically comes from chalk aquifers under Cambridge. Cambridge is situated on chalk rock, which is quite a porous rock, so it soaks up water quite easily. Water flows down through the soil and the rock over, lying above, and collects in the chalk. There's like an impermeable layer under the chalk, maybe clay or something like that, and the water is basically held there. You can see where it says river, you can see basically why we get a river. There's a channel that runs through the aquifer. The level of the water of the aquifer basically gives us a water table. So there we go. The river can also be fed by springs, where the pressure of water in the aquifer pushes water out from the rock, so you'll get springs feeding into the river as well. So water in aquifers is known as groundwater, and this is where Cambridge gets most, if not all, of its water from. As Junayd said, ideally it's a perfect source of water. The water filtering down through the chalk rock makes it clear and almost drinkable straight out of the river. It's obviously treated, but in ideal circumstances the water is very, very pure. The water we get, 65% of it is used for domestic purposes, drinking and washing and the like. About 20% is used for agriculture, watering fields, etc. 70% of the water supply in the southeast of England comes from chalk aquifers beneath the surface. The water is mostly pumped from aquifers via boreholes. It's a bit difficult to show a borehole because they're underground, but this gives you some idea of the size of a borehole. This is the machinery they use to drill them. Basically drill a huge, great borehole, basically down into the aquifer, put a pump at the bottom and pump the water out. Fresh water is actually a very precious resource on Earth. It's only about 3% of the world's water is fresh water. The vast majority, 97% of it is salt water, seawater and the like, or saline water from aquifers. The River Cam and the residents of Cambridge are pretty much competing for water. But, and here's the big problem, as Junayd says, Cambridge's population has grown substantially in recent years and continues to grow. It's become a very focused centre of economic development, if you like. All of the extra people need more and more water as their numbers increase. And this graph shows a quite remarkable increase in the last, well, not even 20 years. It's gone, the population has gone up by over 100,000 in the last 10 years. This causes problems because obviously there's only a certain amount of water stored in the chalk. It's like a big tank that's constantly topped up with rainwater. However, rainfall in the region is pretty poor. Cambridge in the southeast is one of the driest regions in Britain. I've heard it say that parts of North Africa get more rainfall than this area of Britain. I don't know how true that is, but we don't get much rainfall basically. This means that the groundwater isn't replenished as quickly as it needs to be. I mean, the period from March to May last year in East Anglia was the 4th driest period since records began in 1892. This obviously leads to over-extraction, where more water is taken out of the aquifer than is put back in. And this, as Junayd has said, causes problems for the river, which also gets its water from the same source. The River Cam's flow is now about 33%, that's 1/3 of what it should be. If it weren't for the locks and the weir in the actual centre of Cambridge, the river would possibly run dry in the summer, which wouldn't be much good for punting and tourism and basically the image of Cambridge, really, quite apart from all the ecological damage. The situation is so bad that the water companies have to take about 20% of the water they take from the aquifer and pump it straight into the river to prevent it drying out in the summer, a process known as augmentation. This is mad. There's too much water being taken from the river, so you take the water you're pumping out, which could be feeding the river, and pump it back into the river. Who dreamt that one up? I don't know. But it's mostly just for appearance's sake, really, and to try and preserve some of the wildlife that still exists in this very, very damaged ecosystem. It's not a good situation, like I said. I mean, it's not just the River Cam. There's tributaries to the River Cam, such as Cherry Hinton Brook, Bin Brook, Coldens Brook, Hobson Brook, Vickers Brook. These are all chalk streams. And chalk stream habitats are very rare. Again, as Junayd has said, 80% of the chalk streams in the world occur in the south and southeast of England and support a range of delicate ecosystems found nowhere else on the planet. Unfortunately, as we've said, these areas are the areas where pressures from increasing development are worst. Everybody has to move to the southeast of England, it seems, in order to get a job or earn a reasonable amount of money. They provide habitats for many significant species, including water voles. That's actually, there's a water vole. Kingfishers. I've only seen a kingfisher twice in my life, and on both occasions that was on a chalk stream. So I don't know if anyone else is there. You cannot miss them when you see them. It's like a little electric shock. First time I saw one when I was a child, I thought someone's pet parrot had escaped. Little thing sat on the side of the river. Damselflies, dragonflies. These all rely on the river for food and for basically their larvae as well. A lot of them live in water, spend their larval stage in water. And water voles, which are very, very endangered, live in riverbanks, except very, very sensitive to pollution. These are very different from rats, by the way, much more harmless. It says here, chalk streams are basically the equivalent of the Northern Hemisphere's Amazonian rainforest in terms of species diversity and uniqueness. I mean, we moan at Brazil about cutting down its rainforest, we moan about Indonesia about all the logging, and yet we're quite happy to damage an equally valuable ecosystem. I mean, if that's not enough as well, the River Cam's also under threat from pollution, runoff from fields with agricultural fields which have had pesticides and herbicides put on them, and also, perhaps worst of all, sewage. If we happen to get a lot of rainfall and the sewers are overwhelmed, water companies are allowed to actually pump untreated sewage straight into the river. How wonderful is that? So what needs to be done? Good grief, I wouldn't have made that question mark quite so purple if I know what it was going to look like, but never mind. Main solution has to be substantial reductions in groundwater abstraction from the aquifer. And this basically means cutting back on development in Cambridge. The development of Cambridge has basically gone on too long. There's too many people been encouraged to move here. There's too much investment, dare I say it, in Cambridge. Cambridge is a wealthy city. It can look after the population that's here at the moment. There are other areas of the country which are a lot worse off financially than Cambridge, and they need investment and development. Instead, Cambridge is just sucking everything in. Investment, talent, jobs and the like, to the detriment of both the city, its built environment, and the ecosystem of the River Cam and the like. As Junayd said, there is not enough water for the people who already live in Cambridge. Adding more people to that is just not going to work, really. Need less of it. And the irony of it is as well, since I've been talking about water shortages, the development, because it tends to cover the land with concrete, tarmac and housing, which water can't soak through, it's not supposed to, any water that does fall will tend to run off straight into the river, cause the level to rise really quickly and possibly cause flooding. But at the same time, it doesn't allow the water to soak into the aquifer to be kept for later use. And also, if you carry on pumping water out of an aquifer beyond a certain level, you risk damaging the aquifer. All the pore spaces that I mentioned earlier that water can store in, they can collapse. It's like squeezing a sponge, basically. So then, even if you do get water reaching the aquifer, it cannot hold as much water possibly. So over-extraction can also actually damage the physical nature of the aquifer. Not good. So basically, what can we do? That's the main thing that needs to be considered. There is too much house building and development, and basically, it sounds awful to say, doesn't it, but too many people in Cambridge at the moment, never mind any projected increases in that. Other parts of the country deserve more investment and more jobs. So, but on a smaller scale, and we can do things like harvesting rainwater and recycling grey water. Most of you have probably got water butts attached to your gutters, water in the garden with that, rather than taking water from the tap. Grey water, things like using your dishwater or bath water to water the garden and things like that. That can be done on a large scale and can make a huge contribution to not taking water from the aquifer. It's water that otherwise would have gone into the sewage system, and we're using it for something else. Water meters, you can pay for how much water you use rather than just a fixed rate. Makes people think about how much water they're using. Do you need to wash the car twice a week, etc., etc. Yeah. And here's a big one as well. Here's another large one, which is out of your control, but really does need addressing. There's leakage control, basically leaky pipes, leaky water pipes. I mean, how much water do people think is lost to leaks from water pipes in the UK? I was quite amazed by this. Think of a number, and I can bet you won't guess how much. This was the amazing one. So 3 billion litres of water is lost to leaks every day in the UK. That's about 1,180 Olympic swimming pools. 660 million gallons in old money. That is quite remarkable. And that's an easy fix for the water companies. A lot of the water pipes in Cambridge are maybe Victorian or maybe, decades old. It's an easy fix for them to stop the water leaking again, and that reduces pressure on the aquifer. Less water needs to be abstracted. Demand management. Take a shower instead of a bath. If you use a normal shower rather than a power shower, you use an awful lot less water than if you take a bath, and you get just as clean. And then there's growing drought-tolerant plants instead of lawns. I mean, I've put a cactus here. I'm not suggesting we start growing cactus in Cambridge, but there are plants that can less...
1 minute.
Okay, that need less water than lawns. We see golf courses and the like, and lawns being watered with sprinklers. Choose your plants carefully. You won't need to do that. And that is basically it. I think, yes. Yeah. Okay. Finished. Over and out.
Okay, and now we'd like to go to Fabiana, Piccoli, Araújo, Santos, an LLM candidate at the University of Cambridge and co-founder of Itacaré water carrying project of Brazil.
Hello, Nico. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to talk to you. And in my opinion, there is nothing more important than talking about water. It's my favorite subject in the world, and it has permeated all spheres of my life. So I am an international law student, and water is definitely an international issue as well. So I study international water law. And one thing that I can say is that there is no possible way that we can tackle the water crisis if we don't deal with this topic collectively and internationally. Rivers and aquifers definitely do not respect boundaries. So for a river, it doesn't matter if who is taking care of it is Brazil, Argentina, or Peru. But it does matter, however, if Brazil, for example, is taking all the measures to clean and protect the rivers, and as soon as it crosses the boundary, it becomes completely polluted. The whole ecosystem and the whole aquatic ecosystem is harmed, and that's bad for all the countries that are the riparian countries around the rivers. So countries working together is absolutely necessary for the sustainable management of our waters. And there are examples, successful examples all over the world of river basins organizations that work together and exchange information and plan projects for the sustainable development of the basins. And when I was in university in Brazil, I studied the Guarani Aquifer and all the international legal regime that surrounded this aquifer. And it was, in the end, it was a little bit frustrating because it took 10 years for the countries to actually ratify this treaty that was signed in 2010, and only in November last year it entered into force. So now high hopes that countries will work together for the sustainable management of this aquifer, which is so important for South America. And another part of my life that is very closely related to water is my family. And we are developing together in Brazil a project that is called Itacaré, Water Caring Project Brazil. And it is a platform that transforms the act of taking care of water into a game. And it was born from the feeling that the connection between my cup of water and the water that I shower with or I cook with the river spring is completely broken. So we all value water. We all know that it's really important for our lives, but we have no idea where it comes from. And this very fact is linked to the aim of our project. It's to create this connection between my cup of water and the river springs where it comes. And we're gonna do that by creating a chain of water carriers all the way from the river spring to the sea, aiming to create this feeling that every action and everyone has a responsibility towards protecting water in the whole chain from the river spring to my cup, for example. And it locates water springs, and it creates this chain of water carriers, we call, who are trained and rewarded for protecting the quality of these waters from source to sea. It offers 4 tools for people joining a chain of water carriers. First of all, real-time data about the water around and the water in the chain. Second, formal training on water protection. Third, community support. And fourth, financial rewards for actions taken in the chain. So the same feeling that Argentina cannot be a broken chain while Brazil is taking all the steps to protect the water, we want to create this feeling that none of us can, and we are all very responsible for protecting the water for everyone. And it was, just to finish, this project was born from the acknowledgement that everyone understands this value of clean water and feels this natural urge to take care of it, and that people who live by the water springs tend to do that spontaneously. But as soon as the water follow its course, they are used and wasted, and we lose this very important sense of responsibility. So what we're trying to do is to recreate the sense of responsibility towards water, and it motivates me lots. And I think, like in my best dreams, this can be applied in like a global scale with all countries collaborating together to take care of shared basins and aquifers and rivers, and so that everyone feels responsible and connected to this very, very precious resource. I think that's what I have. And I'm happy to answer any questions or anything.
Thank you. Warmest thanks to all our speakers, Junayd, for your brilliant presentations, and Ian, and also Fabiana for your wonderful speech about the international crucial work that you all are doing for sustainable water management and protecting rivers and streams. I'd like to specially welcome today and highlight Miss Thurston and Mrs. Barker, who are teachers champions from King's College School. And also hand over to Paloma Barr, my co-chair from St. John's Deputy Chair of the Ecocouncil, co-chair of the Eco Activities meeting, who will take rounds of comments and questions. Please don't lurk. Turn on your cameras. Please also introduce yourself over the chat, like Dr. Sarada of India did. And yeah, I'll hand over to Paloma now.
Hi, yeah, I'm Paloma. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I'll tell them how to ask. Put your hand up.
Yeah, and you can like either put your hand up if you have your camera on, or if you can't turn on your camera, you can go to participants and then raise your hand virtually.
You need to look at that.
If you, I think you can do that. Oh yeah, you can raise hand. So yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments?
You want to ask?
I think Sweden might have raised her hand or his hand.
Oh, okay, yeah, we can have that question.
You need to say the name of the person.
I have been asked to read out the question. So the question she has is, how long do you think it will take England to clean all the rivers?
Okay, Ian, would you like to answer that question? Ian Rolls?
Oh, that is a very good question. Depends entirely on the political will. I think there's got to be the will to do it. It obviously won't be cheap, and it does rely on some fairly big changes to the way we think. Like you say, I mean, we'd have to, in order to improve the state of the chalk streams in the southeast and Cambridge in particular, we have to sort of bring a halt to the growth agenda, if you like, the thought that the economic growth in Cambridge is the most important thing. So that would possibly require a change of government, but then would the government coming in, then the next government agree with this, you know? So I mean, it could be done reasonably quickly, I think, but there's got to be the political will there to do it. And political will starts with people's will, because we, in a quite direct way, influence what the politicians think, because their jobs depend on us, if you like. But yes, it's how long's a piece of string, really? Like I say, political will, which is influenced by how keen we are on seeing change. I think can't put a number on it, I'm afraid, but sorry.
Okay, thank you. Alex, do you have a question?
With regards to climate change, I know that increasing temperatures and changing climate can have an effect on ecosystems and water supplies. So what's the what's sort of verdict on how climate change might affect water ecosystems?
Okay, Fabiana, would you like to answer that question? Sorry, you're on mute.
You might need to unmute.
Okay. Well, I think climate change will affect water in a lot of spheres. And I think we have we have a big challenge, especially with quantity and availability of water in dealing with in the international arena. So for example, what's going to be the effects of droughts in Africa, for example, and what are the effects of all these international treaties that are dealing with some quantity of water that exists now, but that is probably going to change very quickly, and countries need to be ready to deal with these situations. And I think we have a responsibility as well, as in our as citizens, and not only relying on states and countries, that we are going to have to protect our waters more and more with climate change, because there is a serious risk of a water crisis, and I think we can all take part in this action.
Okay, thank you. Hugh, Travis?
Yeah, sorry, this might be a question that's not too easy to answer because I don't know whether you've got the information. But do you know what the requirements are to meet a good environmental river status? Because understanding whether it is a particularly high standard or a low standard will help contextualize the issues that UK rivers are facing. It was just something that I felt we didn't really go into.
Okay, Ian, do you want to answer that question?
I'm frantically Googling water quality criteria, but I don't actually have any figures, but I think one of the main criteria has to be ecological diversity. I think then you've got things like pollution, if you like, quantity pollution from things like pesticides and the like, heavy metal pollution and things. But I will try and find some. The Environment Agency should be able to provide some actual figures as to what constitutes good, bad, or indifferent water quality. But now, like I say, I'm afraid I don't actually have any figures to hand, but I think ecological diversity has to be a good indicator of river health. Water quality is measured by things like dissolved oxygen content, biological oxygen demand, which basically tells you whether it's polluted with organic material or not, the heavy metal concentrations and the like. It'd be probably best to go and look on the Environment Agency's website for that. That will give you potable water. And then if you want to talk about river health, like I say, you need to go into diversity of species, etc., in both the river itself and the riparian ecosystems along it. So that's
would like Junayd also like to answer that question?
So as I understand, the question is what requirements, when my slide about how no rivers reached good environmental status in 2019, what requirements are there for it to reach good status? Yeah, there's a lot of like kind of science which is a bit beyond me, to be honest. I know they do take samples of the water and they do chemical tests on it, and what they found with this chemical test in 2019 was that all of the rivers had passed chemical tests. They were all polluted. I can't say too much beyond that because I don't want to. Yeah.
Fine. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And if there's no other questions or comments, I have a question. What is the single most important thing that we can do as individuals to help improve the health of our water bodies? Fabiana, would you like to answer that?
That's a good question. So I think if we apply the ideology of Itacaré, a good action that we could take is to try to identify where our water comes from, for example, right? And like try to identify, because I think it's really serious that here in Cambridge, for example, we accept that we have clean water in our house, but that literally if you fall in the river, you might get sick. So how is this link so broken, and what can we do to actually create this link again and build as a community that takes care of such an important part of the city, which is this river. And it's not only pretty to do sports or watch it, it's dangerously polluted, and that's very serious. So I think we should act as a community to create this link of responsibility towards the source of our water, and not take it for granted every day as if it was a magical thing that came to us.
Okay, thank you. Nico?
I was just wondering how rivers and wetlands can be used as carbon sinks to eat up all the CO2.
Okay. Junayd or Ian, would you like to answer that?
So was that using? I'm sorry, I was answering Hugh there. I found him a link. Sorry, could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Sure. I've just forgotten the question. Yes. If can we use rivers and wetlands as carbon sinks to eat up all the CO2?
Oh, well, that's what I thought you said. Absolutely, yes, most definitely. Wetlands and the peat that accumulates under wetlands because of the lack of oxygen, basically, the vegetation can't decompose when it dies. A huge store of carbon sink. So that's why, you know, using peat on your garden is not a good thing. And it's one of the reasons why cutting down things like rainforests, well, not rainforest, but forest is a bad idea, because if there's like peat or whatever under the trees, that can then start to decompose because oxygen gets to it, basically, and that can then release the carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. Rivers are a great way of soaking up carbon dioxide as well. The sediment at the bottom can trap carbon in it. There's algae, all the plants that grow in there as well. So yeah, they're vital. I think it was, I don't know if you ever heard of David Bellamy, very famous botanist from a long time ago. But he reckoned that the actual phytoplankton, which is basically algae living in the sea, was one of the main sources of oxygen basically on the planet. All the trees on land were important, but it was the algae in the oceans that was mostly responsible for the oxygen, really, or the majority of the oxygen that was released into the atmosphere, and for trapping most of the carbon dioxide as well. But how true that is, I don't know. But aquatic plants are vital, basically. So yeah, you're spot on there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. I don't think there are any more questions or comments.
You could ask another of my one. Who is the single most important? Who do we lobby? Who do we protest to?
Okay.
Neil Shaler has raised his hand as well.
Oh yes, yeah. Okay, so Neil Shaler, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about growth being the problem, and you know, to a large extent, I would agree. But zero growth is obviously not enough to fix the problem. What we're doing now is unsustainable, and so there has to be somewhere where we can get the economic wherewithal to fix the pipes, to retrofit current industry, current water use in housing, and is unsustainable. And of course, we should be developing, growing better, and using some of that technology to retrofit current buildings, have green roofs, have more biodiversity within our city, all of these sort of things. Obviously, we need to change. We shouldn't be growing just as we have been, I agree. But I wonder if anybody can make a comment on that sort of grow better idea.
Okay, Junayd, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, you make a good point. We can use knowledge and technology and finance to live in a more sustainable way and have a more have a better integration between urban and environment, the urban and the environment. What I will say is that also in terms of like with the whole when we say we need to be careful about how Cambridge grows, obviously we have to take into account like the areas in the north of England do not have the same growth as Cambridge. So like if you, for example, in the 1980s, all of the coal mines were closed in the north of England. Now, on the one hand, that has made the UK much less reliant on fossil fuels. But on the other hand, it meant that because there were not any replacements for all those jobs that were lost, there was quite a lot of unemployment in the north. And so we've had this strange circumstance where the south of England has had quite a lot of pressure, and the north of England has had has been left quite almost underprivileged. And so when we say like we need to be careful about growth in Cambridge, we don't necessarily mean that like we're not allowed to have like anything in Cambridge, any like jobs or anything like that. What we need to stress is that it has to be done carefully and with a more holistic approach to the whole of the country and to the whole of our environment.
Okay, thank you for that. And Dr. Sardana?
No, that's fine. Let the doctor speak.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would just like to share some of my research on this water pollution. In India, actually, no river is yet pollution free. It is also polluted. And what I am doing, I am concentrating my research is that on the water pollution caused by some industries, particularly the distillery plants and the alcohol industry, the textile industry, and the dye industry. These industries are very much in number in India, in almost every part of every state. So what I have observed through my research is that all the rivers, all the industries are releasing their wastewater to the rivers ultimately, and the river water goes to the agricultural field, which causes a lot of damage to the food crops. So the industry people, they are treating their wastewater chemical means, by chemical means, which results also in polluting some of the chemical called as melanoidin. I have found out this chemical melanoidin which is causing a lot of pollution and is a pungent odor. So what I am doing in my research lab is that I am utilizing a group of microbes like bacteria, algae, and which have a capacity to degrade this polluting chemical melanoidin. And I found that not only in India, but also in Nepal also, some of the polluted rivers has the pollution rate has been lessened due to the application of the composite form of microbes, bacteria, algae, and fungi also. So, so this is just a part of my research that how we can utilize our biological means to control the water pollution, because we can't stop the growth. According to the NIL, we have to go, we have to proceed. Simultaneously, we have to choose to a particular type of biological or bioremediation so as for a sustainable development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ian?
Oh, just to add to what Junayd said, I think I'm personally just talking about the growth in Cambridge. I think because I think it leads to inequality within Britain, the whole sort of sucking all the money and talent into sort of vortex that is Cambridge and starving the rest of the country from that. I'm not going to use the term levelling up because that's used by not one of my favourite people, but clearly there is room for spreading the benefits of our advanced economy more widely throughout the country. However, moving on from that, I do think the idea of continual economic growth, you know, the whole thing of infinite growth on a finite planet, somebody's got to draw a line under that at some point, because it is going to finish us off. We can't, I mean, when you look at what counts towards GDP, you know, the more you generate, the greater your GDP. So the more, if you like, the more rubbish you create, the healthier your economy looks. And that's insane. Yeah. So I think the human race can proceed without necessarily increasing its, you know, apparent value, if you like, which is only discussed in financial terms. There has to be a sort of, people talk about decoupling growth from environmental damage. I think we need to decouple society from finance, basically. It should just be there as a method of exchanging goods. It should just be a means in itself. I think we need to sort of reevaluate our relationship with money, if you like.
Okay.
I'll start getting political, and then we'll all suffer.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't think there's any more questions. But I also have another question. Who should we lobby as activists? Fabiana, would you like to answer that question?
So I think all the sectors are super important, right? So for example, starting with universities and the power that universities and schools have in contacting local authorities, so municipal bodies. And I think there is a very strong, a very strong potential in community work, and that we become very strong if we work together. And if we have legitimacy, for example, from Cambridge University supporting us, and very like high standard and important institutions in the community, it gives us strength and value to talk to people that can make a change. And so I think organizing in community is the first step, and then trying to get the support of influential institutions like, for example, the University of Cambridge, and then talking to big people.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, Junayd?
So in Cambridge, we're having a local council elections coming up, and every seat's up for grabs. So from your local councillor to the mayor of Cambridgeshire, all these seats are going to be up on the election. So what we need to do is get in touch with the candidates and ask them, like, what is your position on the river? What is your position on the growth agenda? And we need to have these conversations with them and see who will stand up for the local ecosystem, and make sure we vote for those people who have the power. So there's a local organisation called the Cambridge Friends of the River Cam. They will be holding a meeting with candidates to discuss the river and where they will stand if they are elected. So I'm sending the link to their website now. So if you go to their website, find out about them, and stay in touch to hold your candidates to account.
Okay, thank you. Ian?
I agree with that completely. I think we also maybe need to ask questions about the Greater Cambridge Partnership as well, which is a development body that's sort of been, I think it was imposed on Cambridge pretty much, but we've got local councillors and business interests and landowners all sitting on the same committee, deciding on how money in development gets sliced up in the city, which I think is not quite right. Basically, you've got people who are supposed to be being regulated, if you like, by councillors, basically sitting in on meetings and influencing development decisions. So if you want to get really awkward with your councillor, you might want to ask them about the significance of the Greater Cambridge Partnership and its relation to the growth agenda. I mean, we're quite lucky in Cambridge. All of our local councillors are personally quite nice people. You know, they're all quite approachable, but I think they do need to be asked these awkward questions about why certain councillors, not all of them, are sitting on a body along with landowners and developers, because it doesn't look good, quite apart from anything. I'm not implying that they are corrupt in any way, but why do the developers and landowners get a say, and the ordinary quote unquote voters don't? So I approach, whatever age you are, find your local councillor and write them an email. And say, just ask what their opinions are on growth and the environment of Cambridge. I say they're all nice enough people. You know, they don't bite. No, they don't, honest.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. And Nico?
Yes, quickly before we end, I'd like to just promote our next seminar, promoting sustainable lifestyle through preventing plastic waste, on Wednesday, the 24th of February, 2021. Our focus is how can we better promote and practice more sustainable lifestyles at home and through our shopping habits, even during lockdown, preventing plastic waste and protecting our fragile rivers, oceans, and ecology. Our speakers are going to be Freya Tikava, a Gold Award laureate from the Voices of Future Generations Children's Rights Initiative, Child Author of Europe, Cambridge Schools Ecocouncil Deputy Chair and Co-Chair of the Eco Activities Committee. And our Ecocouncil speaker will be Luana Fernandez-Sixes, the Cambridge Schools Ecocouncil Communications Officer, student leader of Long Road Sixth Form from Ecocouncil, key organizer of student climate strikes and eco seminars. Our experts will be Emma Thomas, co-founder and director of the Full Circle Zero Waste Retail ecologist, and Matthew Clemens, manager of the Cambridge Waitrose grocery store. Please register, and I hope to see you all on Wednesday.
Send the invitation.
Oh, and please send the invitation to friends. Yeah. Thank you very much.